Everybody, this is Pat Windrow once again at the table Easel with a program which is dedicated to painting and drawing from life, or drawing and painting, whichever comes first. And today, this is a study of pansies, seeing as how the season is upon us, and they're looking better than ever. I have picked one of my favorite little vases for this thing, and the pansies speak for themselves. So, starting with a prepared background, and that's something that I do sometimes. It simplifies the business of learning how to do this painting from life, and the background, of course, can be absolutely simple, very plain, nothing to it, in order for the flowers to show off the best. When you use a space this size, I have not given a border to it because it's going to probably be a mat, but when you use a space this size, you should try to fill the entire space with the subject at hand. And so I'm going to begin on the right side with the larger arrangement, and then progressively work towards the left side and hopefully get them all arranged. Now the business of proportion is one of the problems here. So I'm going to sort of give a general feeling of where these go. The top one, the one that is the highest on the composition, should go in first in order to be able to determine how far away this is going to get on the canvas. In other words, it is sometimes difficult to place these things and not run out of space at the bottom. So for the general beginning, I'm going to use this flower as my starting off point. It's one of the highest ones on the arrangement. So hopefully, as time progresses, these are the things that take a little bit of skill proportionally of how to place these on the canvas. With a landscape, it's quite different, because a landscape, you can cut it. If you've run out of space, you simply cut the landscape. The composition may suffer, but at least it isn't as devastating as finding yourself here with not enough room for the bottom of the vase. So you always try to keep these things, unless it's a purposeful composition whereby it is much bigger than normal, you try to keep these a little bit under normal size. That will enable you to be able to make sure that the proportion of the subject matter on the canvas is correct. At least that you don't run into the danger of running out of space. Using one particular blossom as a focal point, trying to decipher all of these things, is quite complex, and flower painting, nobody ever said was easy. But as I say, this show is supposed to try to help a little bit to decipher these things. It's very perplexing to see all that, but you have to take them one step at a time, one petal at a time, as a matter of fact. There are many painting classes that say that you must take the entire flower into consideration immediately, and I disagree with that. I think that one should take each petal at a time. That way the anatomy of the flower is not compromised, and you manage to somehow get the right amount of petals. It is always interesting to me to see amateur paintings of flowers, and suddenly I see that a pansy, which in my experience is supposed to have 5 petals, suddenly discovers that there are 6 and 7, and that's because the anatomy of the flower has not had enough attention paid to it. With a rose, it's different. Rose petals change in number, and daisy petals are usually very much the same. Carnations we don't even talk about because they're so complicated, and marigolds are impossible. So let's play with these flowers that have a definite, wonderful, continuously and consistent number of petals going for it. Not that one should count these things, except that they're important if you are interested in having the flower immediately recognizable. So I have this little very dark, wonderful, rich, deep blood red pansy over here. And the color of this is absolutely astonishing, and I'm going to be using what I call the glamorous colors on the painting of this, because flowers have colors that landscapes do not. And the placement of this vase, I'm using this yellow pansy right here as where the vase begins. And the vase begins directly underneath this little yellow petal. And if you don't do that, you might find yourself into trouble. You've got the vase all askew, and it can't possibly function holding the flowers. So, and here is the point where the vase comes underneath this blood red one. So if you use your points of reference, it isn't just important in landscapes, but it's also important in still lives. And here's this sort of lovely little Victorian vase that is one of my favorites. And I believe that using vases that you own, it's always nice to be able to then put flower arrangements in it as the time progresses, and then even have the flower arrangement next to the vase itself when you're displaying flowers next to the painting. And here I'm just putting these swirls in to show you how you really plan. There's nothing possible without a plan. And these lovely squirrels. I bought that little vase in a flea market in Belgium, and I believe I paid the staggering sum of 50 cents for it. It's quite a wonderful piece. They do lovely things in Europe with glass, beginning with the Venetians, but also as you go around, you don't have to go to the gift shops, you go to the flea markets, and that's when you, just like here, that's when you find these wonderful treasures. And the little pink vase always reminds me that the day I bought it was a very gray, dismal day, as it usually is in Belgium, and that the little pink vase seemed to make that less gray and dismal. So I'm now as usual, I'm working with a plan, and I always stress that you cannot start applying paint to canvas without a plan, just like any other endeavor. So the drawing of these, because I do it with a brush, does not mean that that's the way to do it. I find that that's the most efficient way for me to do it. A lot of people don't know how to handle a brush, but this brush is very cooperative. It's one of these lovely little striping brushes. They're available in any art store, and they act almost like a pencil. The fact that it is colored turpentine eliminates the problem of messy charcoal that gets picked up later. So this is the first phase of this composition, and I use the word composition advisedly because that's what you must do, is to compose pictures. The business of just sort of hoping that the pictures are going to compose themselves does not happen. Now, the placement of this little vase is going to be that's a little paper clip holder with its top off and the paper clips out, and it's acting like a little vase, so it's playing a double role. This is the placement of that little paper clip holder, just about here. Using the yellow pansy on the table as a guide as to where it goes. And as you can see, I've got my little blown glass vase for one arrangement, and then the improvisation of using a little paperclip holder for the other one, because I wanted something very small. Now I'm working on I'm laying out the yellow pansy, which does not go further than the division of the vase. That's I'm going to keep referring to the points of reference, because it is extremely helpful if you get into the habit of that. To me, it's second nature. I understand exactly how to find the point of reference, but for the people who are beginning, it's something to be pointed out and to remember. Now, here we are on what I call the very consistent and lovely arrangement that pansies have, namely that they are 5 petals. And there's always this little triangle in the middle, and that's another reference point. And so here's 1 petal, 2, and here comes the 3rd. This one sort of curls up here. Sometimes they're a little unpredictable. Here's 3, and then the 2, what I call wings in the back. These they're usually a different color, and I suppose there's nothing quite as intriguing as the variety with which pansies can be grown. There are, I'm sure, hybrids all over the place, but for the most part, there is the general number and shape of a pansy. This one, of course, is interrupting it, or the white one is interrupting the yellow one over here, and here's the little triangle in the middle, which is where you start your petals from. This petal comes out like so, and then of course the wonderful dark places go later. But if you sort of have it in the back of your mind that you are building a portrait of this flower, you really can't miss. Just practice. Either pencil with a pencil or with this business, the way you see my brush behaves, very cooperatively. If you begin to know how to handle, and you'll find that eliminating charcoal from your work is essential. It's an absolute aberration to think that people are. And the fifth the other petals are hidden behind here. You see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and the fifth one is hidden back here somewhere underneath this little purple one. So, as I say, counting petals may seem like a less than important, but it isn't when you're dealing with something as vital as trying to make a flower totally true to its structure. And I certainly would never dream of changing the structure of these things, seeing as how they're probably almost close to perfect. Here is 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the fifth one is back here someplace. So. The availability of these is this is the time of year for them, and this is the time of year that if you have ever thought, and most people who see my pansy paintings always gush at the same idea, not about the painting, but about the fact that they love pansies. The painting merely reminds them how much they love pansies. So it's a sort of a good idea as long as they're don't do them from photographs, and certainly don't do them from seed catalogs. Do them from themselves, because they do very interesting things. They're a little bit unpredictable the way their petals will go, and they're of course cheap and available, and then when you finish painting them you can always put them out in the garden, and there they have it for a second run of giving pleasure and joy. So here is the way you would lay this out. Now, it's taken a good deal of time. Now, this is part one of this study of pansies. I always do things in two parts. I like to be able to concentrate a little bit more on technique and on conversation about the subject at hand, and also about color. So there is a general feeling now that the shadow is essential, because it does what I call anchor everything to the ground. Otherwise, this is all floating in thin air. And here is the shape of the shadow. This shadow on the back begins at this white petal, and it sort of has the configuration of the pansies behind it. And as you see, I have a lot of space left on the left. That's fine. I cut this canvas. I find myself very often cutting a canvas to fit the size either of what I'm doing, or the fact that it is more attractive as a slightly square painting. If I have a moment, I will cut this right here on the show and show you how one can certainly accommodate the shape of the painting with the the way it looks. So here is a complex. I do not deny it. It is a complicated layout of a very complicated subject matter. However, things now will fall into place. It is the drawing of them that is the perplexing part of it. Certainly, I assume that anybody who wants to do flower painting has been kind of involved with drawing. If you haven't, well, it's a good time to start, because without drawing these things, there is no way that it's going to work. I'm working with pure color and a nice new thing that I have found called archival painting medium. It is much less expensive than this, which is now up to $12 a jar. I am finding myself using that less and less. And the archival medium does a number of things. It liquefies the paint and makes it easier to apply, and it also dries it very nicely. Overnight, you can find pretty much that a painting has dried to within some reasonable consistency. All right, so now I have this glamour colors coming. Let me start with the most brilliant of all, because that's always fun, then you can work at it later. There is no question of working from back to forward. You work directly on any area. The flowers, I mean, you don't have to work from the flowers from the rear and come forward. And the minute you apply color, all of a sudden there is great enjoyment in this particular business of painting flowers because color is the great seducer. There's no doubt about it. You just cannot resist the sudden wonderful thing that happens to the eye when color is introduced. And here I'm going to put the shadow of this little petal in first. It goes back here, and it's only slightly darker than the bright yellow because you'll see in just one moment it will take care of the brilliance of the other petal. So with that in mind, let me see if this is too subtle for you to see, but I don't think it is. There, the two colors, that makes a difference. The pale yellow is visible against this so-called shadow. There's very little shadow color because these flowers are so brilliant. Now, of course, there is the dark center, and I'm going to not put the paint in where the dark center is going. Just go a little bit past so that the dark center can be applied above. Now, there's an interpretive quality to painting these flowers. You do not want to use extremely harsh lines for the outside of the petals. They can, in fact, be somewhat interpretive. The need to be literal is vital, but also the need to somewhere along the line understand how you can improvise a little bit as you go along. Some of the yellow, some of alizarin crimson, and a touch of what is called sienna is going to work very nicely for these two back petals. And immediately you will see that the business of flower painting does not have to be a terrifying and agonizing problem. It can be totally mesmerizing. And of course, by the time you have a flower painting finished, you've got something which of course is, as I say, people gush over my flower paintings probably because they love the flowers. The paintings are merely a reminder of how nice they are. Here is the, let me see, this one goes all the way down here. This little blue curve goes down here. All right, there we have the beginning of a pansy, and what is going to make it a genuinely recognizable flower is the dark. Well, the dark I'm going to be using with the pure purple from the tube. It's called dioxidine purple, very fancy name, and it is very dark and very rich, and it looks black, but it's not black. So here is the here's the wonderful thing that happens, the magic that happens when you apply the colors, the dark on light colors, and of course you would use a nice free stroke for that. Here you have and when you let the brush fall away, it will give a nice well, improvisational look to something which is of course extremely well organized, but you have to give some freedom to it. And where is that one? Yes, this one does not quite go all the way up because it's in somewhat profile, and so this one does not cover the entire. You're seeing it a little bit differently than I am, but I must be true to what I see, and this one goes up only slightly because it's in profile. There is the painting of a wonderful looking little flower. Over here I have let me see, I can't do that yet, I'll wait. And let me put in the pale yellow center of this flower for the final touch. Before we break in just a second, just let me give you the final touch of the center of this little flower. And who can resist such a, oh, it was orange, yeah, who can resist such a lovely little piece of work? Well, for just a moment I'm going to break. I'll be right back. Don't go too far away. Well, here we are, and time has really flown by terribly quickly, and I'm going to really play the speed game, because in order to be able to get as much of this done as possible before part 2 has to be done, which of course is the way these programs are scheduled, and I try to accommodate the need of time. But I think that maybe by by showing you how to do one or two, it'll be obvious of how to do the others. You do it petal by petal, and therefore it should fall into place the way I'm showing you how to do it. There is a lovely little pale yellow border around these what I call the wing petals, and they have to be put in because that's the breed of this flower, and it's done with some pure color, and it goes all the way around and makes the design absolutely wonderfully delicious. So there is and people are going to be able to recognize and say the details are wonderful because, and it's through observation. I do not believe that one could do this by copying photographs or anything else like that. So let me emphasize once again that the business of working from life is absolutely vital. Here's the very dramatic center part of this, and it's quite purple, of this wonderful white number up here, and don't forget that if you're going to involve yourself in this kind of thing, you should really set aside a very specified block of time whereby you're not going to be disturbed by the phone and by food preparation and by visitors and meals and so on. Just set aside a block of time whereby you can, in fact, complete a flower painting pretty much in one sitting. It should take you far more than the hour which is going to be spent on this, except that here, time constraints are always with me. The interpretation of these flowers is vital for recognition, and here's that little yellow piece in the middle. Certainly, it works very nicely for anybody who is beginning to work on this. Now, I have here some white on my brush and a little bit of pale blue from another painting that I did just recently, and the color hasn't dried yet, so I'm introducing the pale blue with the alizarin crimson, which gives it a somewhat mauve tone, which is what this little one back here in the distance is, behind the white one is, and the little petals sticking out like hiding behind the other one. These are not found in photographic arrangements of flowers. This is only found when you set it up yourself and you pay attention to the way these little flowers and petals play inside one another. Here is the white. See, I've got 2 or 3 brushes going at once because the colors have got to be pure and got to be kept clean. So 2 or 3 brushes at once are essential. It's like not mixing the cutlery when you're in the kitchen. If you cut an onion with one knife, you're not going to use that same knife unwiped off and cut up an apple. So it's very much the same, that you keep 2 or 3 brushes in hand in order to be able to keep the colors pure. It's one of the things that people find quite difficult with painting, is that the colors tend to blend and to mess up and to make terrible smears. What I'm trying to do is to show you how to avoid that, and one of the ways is by having 2 brushes in your hand or 3 and go from one to the other. The dark colors accommodating the need for putting dark colors in, and so forth with the light colors as well. And here's my little yellow brush to take care of the little yellow triangle in the middle of that one. Okay, zipping right along and trying to really accommodate this problem of time is this pinkish one. Absolutely wonderful looking. Alizarin crimson is the color that I'm using, mixed with white. And the need to work quickly sometimes has advantages. You get a lovely spontaneous a feel for it, which means that the flower, of course, has to be paid attention to, because in time, if you take too long, it's going to fade and wilt, and it will no longer be what you think it was, and it will no longer be what you started out to work on. Pay attention to the way the flowers bend and turn when they are crowded against another one. They are not sitting there perfectly flat like little skewered butterflies on a card. They are being pushed by the other presence of the other flowers, which is what makes them interesting in the way their little petals get pushed into different shapes. We don't want to do a wallpaper pattern. This is a painting of flowers in a vase, and therefore the turns are important as well. Here is the and this little fellow has got a white center, so I'm going to take a different brush and just put a little white center in that one. So there it is. This little white middle here is very cute, and the background of that one is a quite pale, mostly white and pink for the back part of this little flower. There we are. Yes, going that way. The interpretation is nice when it's got to be fast. All right, we have now we're going to zoom on down to this white one down here, which has a lot of it in shadow. Therefore, I have to use some shadow color, and that's only slightly mauve, a little bit blue in tone, and a touch of some sienna to give you shadow color of this white flower. If you don't have the shadow color, the flower is not going to look like it's zooming up against the other one. And there is a shadow color for this one, and the white I'll show you. It'll appear in just a second. I should use a little bit more mauve. Let me see if I can get that in there. Yeah, that shadow color should be a little bit more mauve because and then this flower up here is casting a shadow underneath it, and this part is also in shade. Now, as soon as the white appears, you will see that makes a lot of sense. I'm using quick drying white, and here is the white part of this petal. Very brilliant because the light is hitting it very directly, and it means that the depth of the flower is going to be much more evident when the shadow is paid attention to. So here is trying to get a two-vased composition done in a very short space of time, and part two will attempt to accommodate the other composition, and then when it's all over, we will look at it and see whether or not it is at all faithful to the original flower arrangement. Hopefully there is going to be a nice correlation. I like to be able to hold these paintings up against the finished product, against the real subject matter, and see whether or not it has come close to resembling it. Here, this is a white part here, and then there's this very rich, deep purple center, which is, I'm using purple straight out of the tube for this arrangement here. It is so dark that it does not change color when it's in the light. So, yeah, well, a little touch of black would probably even make it better because this is extremely dark. I have, as I say, there's a very, very short time left, but I'm going to show you how to make the really spiky parts of the center of this pansy by taking my little striping brush and picking up the paint and making those spears extremely sharp. And you just pick up the color and you run the spears out very sharply like that, and that will give you the real anatomy of the flower. Here, I'm going to do it over here because those little spikes are very characteristic of these flowers. And don't forget that people are, even though modern art has invaded our lives very much, for the most time people love intimate and very precise detail. They really do. And of course I have been doing that for all of my painting life. And I hope that this has been of interest to you. This is the first part of a study of little pansies. Do tune in when part 2 is scheduled. I'm sure that you'll be interested in seeing, well, you might be interested in seeing the conclusion of this still life study. Thanks for watching, and this is Pat Windrow saying bye-bye.